Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jatin Shory, and I am an immigration and refugee lawyer based out of Calgary, Alberta. I apologize I couldn't be here with you this afternoon, but unfortunately, a bit of a schedule change in the program made it so that it just wouldn't be possible for me to be there in person. But nonetheless, with this handy little program here on PowerPoint, I think we'll get through this quite smoothly. As my slide shows, I'm here to speak about immigration professionals and youth settlement. In our space, as immigration and refugee lawyers, we actually cross paths with organizations like the Center for Newcomers quite often, especially when it comes to vulnerable immigrant youth. So I'm hoping today, with the information that I provide, there's some clarity around maybe some best practices or tips or ideas of how you can be prepared for this influx of immigration and what's going on, and maybe take better notes in terms of how you prepare for that next client or for that next matter in this space. So, by way of background, my work in immigration and refugee law primarily focuses on immigration litigation. So, what that really means is I often find myself in a room fighting Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada or the Canadian Border Service Agency for clients who are facing removal or deportation, loss of status, refugee matters, detention, and admissibility, those kinds of things. And quite often, this world does intersect, you can imagine, in terms of the potential outcomes for clients with the impact of these types of issues with youth, immigrant youth specifically as well. Now, that being said, I will not be speaking heavily about the world of immigration litigation, and instead, I plan to talk about how that world really intersects with the different types of partnerships that we've built in the settlement space. Um, Another added background is that I also sit on the board for the Calgary Bridge Foundation for the Youth, which is a large settlement organization focusing on immigrant youth. Now, as I was preparing for this presentation, I came across the 2022 annual report to Parliament on immigration, which was released about late last year, I want to say in December 2022. And it provided a lot of really interesting facts and figures and projections that I think, as I was digesting the material on my end, I truly felt like it would be very important to share, especially with this audience, because it contains a lot of information in terms of where are we headed in immigration, what are the plans for immigration, and how should we be digesting these materials so that we can stay better prepared to provide the best kind of services to the different types of clients that are going to be entering through all the different types of streams that exist. So I wanted to begin this presentation by looking at a fact that was found in the report, or at least one of the tables that was found in the report, and it speaks to permanent residents admitted in 2021, and it splits it up by countries. And so, of course, if you haven't noticed yet, number one is India. And interestingly, when you look at these figures, and this is what shocked me, was that India makes up for 32% of landings. And, it's not present here, but I know from just previous reports that this figure has slowly been increasing, but relatively staying around the same type of number. What is more shocking is when we look at number two, which would be China, comes out to about 8%. So there's noticeably a huge gap when it comes to immigration landings and source countries. Really, when you try and add up most of these countries together, they still are under India as India alone. And so for me, that shows that there's definitely a certain type of demographic, South Asian demographic, that is making their way into the country. And I think just having that fact understood will undoubtedly help immigration settlement agencies in preparing for the type of resources they may need to prepare for these different populations that are coming. Now, these materials actually go on to show you where are people going when they land in Canada. We had about 405,000, 406,000 total landed permanent residents in the year 2021. As we all know, the projections right now by the federal government are that they want to head towards about 500,000 a year, which is a lot. That's a huge undertaking, at least in my opinion. And it's interesting to see where is everyone going really at the end of the day. When we look down here at this at the bottom of this entire table, you'll see that the majority are landing in Ontario. And we can probably all imagine, especially those of you that are from Ontario, it's very likely Toronto, the GTA, those areas. But after that, next is really Alberta. Quebec, of course, has a high number as well, and BC. So these four regions make up the bulk of immigration landings. We see that there's a lot of emphasis on economic immigration, which has kind of just been the prevailing attitude a little bit before COVID, but definitely during COVID and kind of the after effects of COVID. In the immigration world right now, economic immigration is a very, very high priority, if not number one. And that's reflected even from the 2021 numbers that came out. We see high skilled workers make the bulk of almost, let's say, 50% of the landed economic immigrants that are coming in. Many are coming through what's called a provincial nominee program. So each province has their own pathways for permanent residency in terms of how they want to nominate and select economic migrants that they believe will fit their economic needs. And often these are skilled workers as well. But then going down to family immigration, this is more on the lower end, and then we have the humanitarian, the refugee, and those areas here as well. So a good way to kind of again understand what kind of immigration patterns are coming, what type of families are coming. We all, I'm sure, recognize that with economic immigration, there are many setbacks, especially when it comes to foreign credential recognition and these types of issues. And that, of course, trickles down to how we engage with not just those families, but the type of opportunities that youth who are now coming into Canada may be presented with. This table here is again just another further breakdown of, or more condensed version of what we just saw in the previous slides, but not broken down by what province or territory people were moving into. As I mentioned earlier, this is a breakdown of the projections for the next few years. We're expecting about 500,000 landed immigrants, landed permanent residents coming in annually by 2025. And of course, the bulk of it is going to be economic again. And if the trends show where these individuals are coming from, where they're landing from, predominantly we see South Asia as the launch pad for many of these individuals. And again, humanitarian refugees. I mean, the reality is these are projections, and sometimes you just can't predict who will be falling into this category or what country. Ukrainian and Afghani nationals being the most prime example of just sometimes world events dictate certain outcomes that we just never could have predicted. And knowing from my time on the board at the Calgary Bridge Foundation for the Youth, there is a significant amount of stress when these surprise, global events happen. There's a significant amount of stress that is put on organizations in order to prepare. And I'm confident that many people in this room coming from that space probably felt a lot of it over the last year and a half or so. So why is an immigration lawyer talking about immigration statistics? It's because at the end of the day, immigration lawyers and professionals rely very heavily, believe it or not, on the settlement space, on caseworkers, on mental health professionals, individuals who are just much better equipped to assist clients through various socioeconomic problems that might be going on, various mental health problems that might be going on. And as much as our clients wish we could fill all those roles, the reality is that we are just not professionals when it comes to those types of areas. And so ultimately, this information, I hope, helps various decision makers in whatever roles you play in your organizations in coming to perhaps a better approach. Not that anyone is at fault or anyone is doing it wrong, but just maybe refining certain practices in terms of strategies that are built, any type of predictions or planning for the future that are made, so that ultimately, when we do come in the door, it won't be as much of a surprise, or there isn't a scramble to perhaps get the right people or the right third parties, stakeholders involved. The better prepared that the entire system is when it comes to immigration in Canada and where immigration is going, ultimately does have just a better outcome for all different types of clients. When it comes to youth, youth are really the most vulnerable, and often youth take more leadership roles than they ever anticipated, indirectly due to certain, perhaps, inhibitions by family members, the culture shock, or the priorities that certain families have when they first come to Canada. And so, knowing that certain populations may be coming to Canada, or at least are predicted to come to Canada based on immigration trends, it better prepares organizations to know that when inevitably they're going to cross paths with the children of these families that are coming, that they have the right resources ready to go, culturally, socially. Certain types of realities that these families face are going to be responded to in maybe a more efficient manner at the end of the day. So for me, again, I do apologize for not being able to give this talk in person or to be able to take any questions, even though I have a question slide here in anticipation of what was supposed to be an in-person presentation. This is my contact information. You are free to reach out at any time. I am very informal. And at the end of the day, I hope that everyone had a wonderful conference and learned a lot, got a lot of time to get in sync and network effectively and meet people who, at the end of the day, are all doing the exact same thing for, I believe, the exact same reasons. So thank you again, and have a lovely rest of your conference.